Hi there, thank you for joining us. Today we have Ross Hornbuckle from Audio Gear to talk all about FreeSpeak on set. Let's do it.
Thanks for having me, Thomas. Happy to be here.
So when we're on set, there are a lot of people that are usually spread out over a bunch of different areas. And
especially these days.
Exactly. So when it comes down to communication on set, let's face it, it's hard. And it has changed a lot over the years. We've gone from more of a hardline situation where it's patched into buildings to more of the wireless systems like we have today. What can you tell me, Ross, about the history of FreeSpeak and communication on set?
Yeah, you know, it's been a fun evolution over time. You know, you go back to the old studio productions, right? You were basically in a fixed position, green rooms, backstage, front of house, and you got a panel on the wall and a piece of copper cabling, and it wasn't all that much more complicated than that. And a lot of those systems, kind of the fun part of this, is they're still perfectly viable. They're still in use. The cable's still on the wall. Why not use it?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, you know what? It really holds true. And there's a lot of technologies that advance and become obsolete. And that basic party line system is still as useful today as it was in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. Now our needs have changed on set. We are no longer always in a fixed studio multicam setup.
Exactly. We might be outside on location or just in different areas of the set or the studio where you might be a little bit more limited than if you were just connecting to a cable from the wall or something.
I think we've all experienced in one way or another how nice it is to be wireless in many parts of our life, right? And comms is no different in that respect. So it's as soon as you give one person the freedom of being wireless, well, of course, that leads to more and more members of the crew thinking, well, that's kind of nice. I wouldn't mind being wireless. I wouldn't mind being wireless. And that's good. That's helping collaboration. That's helping workflows. That's helping in many ways execute certain elements of the production that you couldn't do if you were strictly on a wired comm setup.
Absolutely.
So we're happy to be a solution. Now, there are different sets of problems that occur when you want a variety of wireless users than the old wired days.
Well, I can assume the first complication is considering you don't necessarily want to remove the hardline situation because it's still useful, right? Yeah. You need to make sure that whatever system you incorporate into your setup can handle both, that it can integrate in with the hardline system.
Right. And that's been core to, I think, as the technology has evolved with comms, there's always been a priority to look backwards, to make sure that basically any piece of hardware we come out with today is gonna have the 2-wire and or 4-wire capability to connect to whatever you've got already in place. So yes, that is basically table stakes, right? You've got to be able to integrate with your wired party line if needed. You can stand alone, you can hybrid, it's all kind of out there for you.
Ross, I'm going to segue for a little bit. You were talking about the difference between the 2-wire and the 4-wire. Could you explain a little bit, just for anybody that doesn't understand the differences between those, what they are and why they're important? Yeah,
so this was a learning experience for me as well because, you know, those terms get used so loosely, frequently, and the different manufacturers have sometimes had different approaches.
Yeah.
So I guess just to boil it down, right, a 2-wire connection, I guess the first kind of common misconception is you're staring at an XLR cable. You're staring at 3 pins.
Yeah.
So it's like, what is that 2-wire thing all about? And over time, Clearcom had one approach to our pin-out versus some other manufacturers. A lot of those things have been unified over time. Or you'll have hardware that can kind of bounce back and forth between a Clearcom mode or an RTS mode.
That's when you know you've got a really good system that can integrate with multiple headsets, multiple wirings.
Right, exactly. And the long and short of it is, if I guess we had to draw a parallel to sort of another facet of audio would be sort of balanced versus unbalanced. Where in the 2-wire world versus 4-wire, we can think of as a balanced connection. And the 2-wire is the older of the formats, still very, very common, still used very widely. But basically, you are transporting both the audio signal for your party line, and then the power, voltage, some amount of voltage is going down that cable as well to power things like packs, which are driving headphones, which have microphones. So there is a very real amount of voltage and a very specific requirement for the number of packs, wall stations, headsets that you've got on that line. So somewhere in the specifications of your unit, you're going to want to make sure, you might see 4 2-wire ports, 4 XLR ports. That doesn't mean you can put an infinite amount of wired packs.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that if someone is adding on to their system, that just one more pack will be fine. Just one. There is a breaking point.
Exactly.
Now, there's ways around all of these things. There are units that convert from 2-wire to 4-wire if you're adding a more modern piece of equipment that only has 4-wire, let's say. Or vice versa, if you're adding a legacy piece of equipment that only has 2-wire. So there's tons of problem solvers you're going to see to basically get in and out of these different formats. Most things these days will have some amount of both on the back panel.
Excellent. So we can pretty much assume that by the year 2021 and beyond, that when it comes to integration with these older systems, like we said, that you're pretty much covered, depending on who you're going with, Clearcom, for example. So as we go forward, now we're talking about all of the different frequencies and the spectrum and the complications that brings. What can you tell us about the progressment of the frequencies that have been being used and just everything that goes on with that, because it's pretty complex.
Yeah, it's gotten more complex over time.
Yeah, right?
It used to be, like many things, a bit more wide open.
Right.
So anyone in their free time can go ahead and look at the U.S. radio frequency spectrum allocation chart. That's
right here.
That's a fun Google.
Uh-huh.
And that will show you basically, like, where's AM radio? Where's FM radio? Where's the Coast Guard communicating? Where's air traffic control communicating? So basically everyone's got a lane, if you want to think about it that way, and a place where the FCC says, you're a very important industry. We want to make sure no one interferes with you, so you stay right here.
Stay in your territory.
Stay there. It's for you, which is good, and no one else theoretically will encroach. And that works. That has worked very well over time. Knock on wood.
Right.
The broadcast TV folks have a big chunk of spectrum called the UHF band, or ultra high frequency. Mm-hmm. And that worked very well, right? This is how, back in the day, kids, I love being middle-aged and getting referred to younger people now.
Whippersnappers.
When let's say our TVs were wireless and our phones were wired, right? So your TV's got reception over the air, the airwaves.
With the bunny ears.
With the bunny ears, yeah. And that was happening. You were tuning into a TV channel that was in that UHF spectrum, which originally was designated, and these numbers are not necessarily important, but 470 to about 804 megahertz. That was the whole range.
Right.
And then us wireless microphone people and wireless comms people, and generally speaking, the production world went to the FCC and said, hey, we want a lane. Give us some dedicated airwaves.
Notice us.
Yeah, we're special, we're important. And they said, no. But if you look at this big UHF chunk, the TV stations don't occupy everything.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of spaces in between them. So you folks, wireless mics, comms, go ahead and operate in the UHF band. Please do not interfere with public safety, police, fire, paramedics, and TV broadcast. And that worked really well for a really long time. Mm-hmm. And then over time, as people got their TV less and less over the airwaves and more through your internet service provider, and then all of us wanted more broadband coverage for our smartphones.
Which is a different spectrum.
Which at the time was a different spectrum, but Verizon, T-Mobile, and the broadband providers went to the FCC and said, you know what?
This looks pretty good.
This looks like beachfront property from an RF perspective.
Yep.
There are, this is totally
Nobody's
in the weeds.
even using it.
We are way in the weeds, but the reason there is competition for the UHF band is the wave propagation characteristics are very desirable. Mm-hmm. And so what the FCC did is they said, well, let's have all the TV stations transition from analog to digital. If anybody remembers in 2008, 2009, 2010.
Yeah, the NTSC to the ATSC, right?
Yep. And so what that allowed them to do is say, okay, TV channels, you're now more efficient, so you can operate closer together. We're going to consolidate you, and we're going to auction off. We're going to turn these public airwaves into effectively private property. And that was the 700 megahertz auction, which took place about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So a big chunk of airwaves for us, because we were sort of the innocent bystanders in that, went away.
Yep.
Which meant we had to reallocate downwards.
That's when everybody was selling off their block 28s and things like that, and just basically getting out of those frequencies because we're not legally allowed to use them anymore.
It is the same thing as eminent domain. If they came and said, hey, we're going to build the 10 freeway through your backyard, I'm so sorry, we're going to buy your house and build the freeway there.
They're going to build it.
They're going to
do it.
And that's what happened. And we've all gotten broadband coverage out of it, which is generally speaking a good thing. Or hard to argue with, at least.
It's bittersweet.
Love those 700 megahertz frequencies. Well, it worked so well once, why not do it again?
Right.
And that's what happened. It officially concluded, went into effect. Basically, the dust has settled from the 600 megahertz spectrum auction about 15 months ago.
Right.
So we are living in the sort of post 600 megahertz world. And all of that is a long way of saying if you owned comms in the 700 or 600 megahertz range, you have had to buy new wireless comms.
You just can't use them anymore.
You are highly recommended not to.
Yeah.
And so what?
Very well put.
What that has caused us to do is to look at other spectrums. And part of what the FCC did is the second time around, and thanks to a lot of the content producers, the Warner Brothers and NBCs and CBSs all kind of went to the FCC and said, we need these airways to produce the content that people ultimately want to watch on their broadband
the chicken
mobile
or the
device.
egg,
And so they said, okay, well, we're going to open up some other spectrums that previously we wouldn't have licensed you to operate in, but now we think is perfectly okay. Which is great. And that has worked. Again, it's a difficult process, but it has actually been working if you take everybody's interest into account. That has led to comms existing in the 1.9 gigahertz band, the 2.4, now the 5. We are expanding our spectrums. And all of those different airwaves have different characteristics.
Right.
Some good for indoors, some good for outdoors, some good for long distance, some good for, passing through walls and whatnot.
That's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand. They think when they get a wireless system, it doesn't matter if you're getting a communication system like this or just a wireless system. They think it's going to transmit 500 feet because that's what the specifications say. No, it's not. It depends on where you are, what your location is, what the building is, what the material of the wall is, what the reflection. There are so many variables you can't just assume anymore, especially in today's day and age.
Yeah, everything counts.
Everything counts.
Is the idea.
Everything is a variable.
Even us, from an RF perspective, we are essentially saltwater, walking saltwater. And we attenuate some of that RF signal, which means when you put that pack on and you walk away from wherever your transceiver antenna is, you are absorbing
that intensity,
some of the signal.
That's radiating out from the pack.
So very commonly when you see a spec, an operating range spec, that can be looked at as a best case scenario. Oftentimes you can well exceed that spec, right? So clear line of sight is the most important thing. You're almost never going to get there, right? There's just some natural...
You're around a wall or in another room.
And all of these things will propagate to a certain degree through any surface, except metal. Metal typically is kind of a hard block. But what's really nice now is that as we've moved into these new areas of the spectrum, of the RF spectrum, we are finding some nice open territory. Things like 1.9, which were commonly used for like the cordless phone at your house. My first baby monitor was a 1.9, a lot of consumer devices, a lot of household residential. Well, that's not really what we're interacting with on set.
And those were probably more analog anyways, so now we're more digital, encrypted, protected.
We're high power, they're low power because they're trying to get coverage in your living room.
We're going to blow that baby monitor out of the water.
Absolutely. You'll have to just listen and see if they cry when they wake up.
Right.
The old-fashioned way. It's just how we did it.
Yep.
the headset for your desk, that is a 1.9 device.
Yep.
Again, not what we're experiencing on set.
Exactly.
So where we used to, it was really tough to compete with the wireless mics, which also exist on set, the DTV stations, police, fire, everybody is in that UHF range. There's a crunch in that spectrum. To go ahead and drop your comms in 1.9 doesn't interfere with anything else on. Exactly.
Get to breathe.
It's a sigh of relief. Yeah.
Nice.
And we can do spectrum scans and analysis to kind of verify that you can comfortably get 20, 30 users on air. That's what we're seeing most commonly. And now we've got these base stations, which are essentially agnostic. The base station doesn't necessarily care that the antenna is 24195, whatever. By the time it hits the base station, it's just comms. So I can mix and match now too. So if I do get 20 channels on air, 20 users on air in 1.9, and I need another 5, well, I can just get a 2.4 antenna. I was gonna have to get another antenna anyways. Now I can start mix and matching my spectrums. So that's very helpful, and that has been working for the vast majority of folks, I'd say. You can get into a Super Bowl type setting where the number of users just explodes and we have to become much more careful about where we place antennas, how we coordinate spectrums. That's probably not the topic for today.
Right.
But where we're going with FreeSpeak is a diversity of spectrums communicating to a common base station. For the user, your pack operates the exact same way. This is transparent to the user. Every spectrum from a belt pack perspective is equivalent. I get the same amount of channels. I can configure my belt pack as needed. For the engineer, just making sure that they're coordinating the right amount of channels per spectrum, you got to do your homework still a little bit. But there's a lot of tools to get you there.
So what about DANTE? That's obviously a huge integration requirement. Let's just call it that in today's day and age. Everybody loves DANTE and the flexibility that it gives you.
Yeah.
Talk to me about DANTE.
Yeah, I think DANTE's here to stay at this point.
Good.
I don't think we're in that middle ground of like, is this going to be a thing?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Clearcom has had a DANTE solution, which is in our Eclipse frame. Eclipse is great because you can basically choose your own adventure. It's a card slot system. And we have a DANTE card. So if you need to add DANTE capability, it's there for you in the Eclipse world. Now that Eclipse system is meant for a large matrix system. Bunch of panels, bunch of wireless, bunch of everything, which is really cool. But you don't always need a big Eclipse system. So now we are going to offer DANTE for the first time in a standalone FreeSpeak style base station.
Nice.
That's going to be called the FreeSpeak Edge base station. Edge previously referred to our 5 gigahertz transceiver and belt pack, and it still does. We're basically bringing that technology from the Eclipse family down into a standalone FreeSpeak style base station. So you will be able to use 1.9, 2.4, 5 gigahertz antennas and packs, and it's got DANTE and 2-wire and 4-wire. It's basically the Swiss Army knife at this point.
You're free to use whatever you need.
There you go.
There you go, right?
So that is adding DANTE, another facet of DANTE. And what I really like that we're doing is giving you the ability to license the number of DANTE channels you need. So as your needs grow, you can increase your DANTE channel count. So you can start with no DANTE if you want. Or right out of the gate, you can do 16, 32, 48, 64. And if you don't pick the right one at first, if you need more over time, you can jump it up in those 16 channel increments.
I think this FreeSpeak system and integration is great because of the fact that it seems like, if you're already in the Clearcom infrastructure or ecosystem, you can simply get this FreeSpeak and integrate it, and now you have all this more unlimited capabilities. Or if this is the first time that you're getting into the comms world and you're starting with the FreeSpeak, you're already starting with the Holy Grail. You can handle anything from that point.
Yeah, that base station concept of I've got an existing wired system and I want to add a wireless component to it.
Boom.
Great. The base station is there and gives you the flexibility to communicate back to your existing system.
Yep.
If you want to start with the FreeSpeak base station, because maybe all you need is a 5 or 8 person wireless setup. Great. Well, what if one day you want to add just some wired packs just for simplicity or cost or for whatever reason? You can come 2-wire out of FreeSpeak into a power supply. That's all it is power for the packs. And now you've added a wired aspect to your wireless system, still just with the base station. So it really can add to or become the heart of your comm system.
Ross, thank you so much for coming today and talking all about the FreeSpeak II.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
If you guys like the FreeSpeak II, give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to learn more about new products when they come out, as well as when we go live next. This is Thomas, and we have Ross from Audio Gear. We'll see you on another one. Take care.